Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at the book Homeland by R.A. Salvatore, which I went back and reread again for you just recently when I was on my trip to Israel. I was there and I was traveling there for 2 days, and I was in there for 7 days proper, and then I flew back for a day. So my goal, I took the first six books in the Drow trilogy series, and the two trilogies, and this is the first book of the next trilogy, and I knocked them out over my time in Israel and my traveling there. That was my goal, and I knocked out 5 of those books. That's pretty good. Book 4, and so forth. So R.A. Salvatore probably isn't somebody who needs a major introduction because he's published so many books and he's had 22 bestsellers on the New York Times bestseller list. So therefore, he's probably not somebody. His introduction of the character of Drizzt Do'Urden in this series, and this is a prelude that does a deep dive into that character from the first three books. That is definitely somebody who hit a lot of popular. It was a home run hit. He was one of the favorite in fantasy of a generation of fantasy lovers. And I think one of the reasons for that is he combines 2 major archetypes that were both very popular. Like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, the rangery good guy who's tracking and finding people and keeping himself safe, and those sorts of things. And then the Elric of Melnimity, the ruler of this evil race of people that was born with conscience. And so he is sort of this brooding anti-hero who from Michael Moorcock a couple of decades later. So they both have different generations. And then this is a couple decades later from the 60s. It's initially published in the 80s. And so it's about 20-some years after the beginning of the Eternal Saga, of the Eternal Champion stuff by Michael Moorcock, and particularly his Elric set that really hit a lot of stuff and was the key sort of iconic character of his day, just like Drizzt Do'Urden was. And so I think by combining those 2 major characters and archetypes into one, he had a big hit from the beginning. Now I talk about how his characterization has changed from the first book and the first trilogy to the prelude. In the prelude, he becomes much more brooding. And more of he's constantly thinking. He's much more introverted than he is in the first trilogy, particularly in the first book. When he's first introduced, he's this happy-go-lucky ranger who's constantly throwing himself in the battle. And in this case, he's not constantly throwing himself in the battle. He's thinking about things ahead of time, and that sort of a thing. So this book, again, my reviews are spoiler-free. But this book, Homeland for you, it tells the story of the Dark Elf city where Drizzt Do'Urden grew up, and you'll find out who his father was and who his mentors were, and why he is the way he is, and his sister that raised him, and so forth. So you'll find out all about all that stuff. You'll do a deep dive into Dark Elf culture as a part of this book, Homeland. So that's what's basically happening here, is telling the story of the first chapter of Drizzt Do'Urden's life. The second chapter will be his life in the Underdark after he flees his homeland, and then the third one will be Homes Above Ground and in Sojourn, which I'm reading now. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it in terms of the book and what's sort of happening, because again, I keep them spoiler free for you folks. This is a big hit. It's one of this is the first things that R.A. Salvatore wrote, and this was something that TSR did a lot. With their major properties during the mid-'80s. They regularly handed their key new stuff to new writers too, like Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman have best-selling stuff with their Dragonlance stuff. And then their first novel that's written in the Forgotten Realm series, Darkwalker, which is written by Douglas Niles, who's never written any fiction. He's only written he's worked for them, so he's written and for the game specifically, so he's written like modules and stuff, but he never actually wrote novels until he kicks off this line, and R.A. Salvatore's the next one in line with Crystal Shard, which I've reviewed for you and gone back and reread. And then you can see that sort of niceness happening. This book's about 300 pages long, too, about 6 hours, 3 days for me to read it, 100 pages a day. So knock it out. pretty quickly. It doesn't take that much of your time to go back and reread. I do like going back and rereading a lot of these classics in the genres that I cover: horror, fantasy, and science fiction, because that's what the channel is all about. This channel's name is "The Worst Thing About New Things," which is a quote by Jacques Joubert, who says that the worst thing about new books is that they keep us from reading the old ones. So I like to go back and reread a lot of these things, or works that you've never heard about by the same authors. I did a deep dive, for example, into H.G. Wells's short stories, and picked up a collection of all his short stories, and read some of those for you. All that are lesser known. Like I also have gone back and read works by other characters, or things that you've heard about but never bothered to read, and those are classics in the genre that are decades old, that sort of thing. And a series of books that started publishing in the 80s, had a big hit in the 80s and the 90s, was in Dungeons & Dragons and gaming, and other books and novels, and had lots of selling stuffs, is something that definitely is on cue for this series. So this is now book 4 by R.A. Salvatore. I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. It's fun, it's fast, it's gripping, it's definitely something, it's a lot of fun stuff is happening, but it's not like this a massively great work yet. I don't feel like he's really hitting all of his cylinders yet. This is only book 4 in his publishing career. So there you are. That's Homeland for you, 7 out of 10. What did you think about it? Have you read Homeland? Would you like to talk about some of the spoilers in the comments below? If so, let's do so. I'd be happy to talk with you about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hey, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again. Have an amazing day.